Welcome back. 365 Sports. Jamie Uyeyama joins us now from Irish Sports Daily. And Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show. I was not like totally surprised, but I was a little bit surprised to see Notre Dame as the favorite this week, given the last couple weeks for them has been a little bit up and down, but they are at home. USC's been struggling. Where do you think that the breakthrough will be for the Irish on offense versus this USC defense that has been woeful the last couple of weeks, if not for the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think the main thing with them is they just give up so many explosive plays, and it's a constant thing. Like they haven't really played a lot of tough offense so far this year, and they struggle to tackle. They give us a ton of bucks in coverage, and really the only thing that they do well is they cause some disruption up front with they have a pretty good D line and a pretty good pass rush, but the secondary is a serious issue, and I think it's just there are plays to be had there because they just make too many mental errors. There's obviously a coaching issue there with what they're doing on defense, because it's been a constant, and it's just something where Notre Dame really kind of just has to kind of be competent, really, and they're going to be able to create plays because they just don't play good fundamental defense within the scheme, and it's certainly not a thing of a lack of athletes with them. They have a ton of great athletes, but they make too many mistakes. And the other thing is that they're really down at corner. We're down to their fourth and fifth corner against Arizona. So I think that's kind of like the big thing where Notre Dame's getting healthier at receiver, and USC is getting worse at corner in terms of their health.
So last week against Louisville, what do you chalk that up to?
Well, certainly there's been a lot of issues in terms of like game plan for Notre Dame, how they've handled the loaded boxes that Duke certainly gave against them, and then Louisville the same thing. I don't think the execution has just been poor for Notre Dame up front. They should just frankly be better. Like they were better, even just looking back at the Ohio State game. And Notre Dame just hasn't been good on the road. They haven't handled these like tough environments. So I think that's another thing that's going to help them quite a bit. Like they've given up 11 sacks on the road and they've given up 0 at home. And some of that is the competition, but some of that is the fact that, they've just been better and they've played more comfortable. The offensive line is clearly more comfortable, has done a better job of handling stuff at home when they haven't had all the crowd noise and the environment against them. So I think some of the stuff is certainly fixable for them, but there's serious questions right now, and it's a huge game for Jared Parker, Notre Dame's offensive coordinator, because there's a ton of heat on him right now.
How much do you think his game plan is restricted because he doesn't trust the younger receivers?
I mean, that's definitely a part of it, right? And the thing that probably doesn't get talked about enough against Duke, and first of all, Duke has a really good defense. They're one of top 20 defense in the country, certainly, and they had 3 healthy receivers in that game, and it wasn't like their 3 best receivers. They were, they had a true freshman, a guy who was a converted running back in his 6th game, a receiver, and they had another guy who's a sophomore who, frankly, has been inconsistent at best. Those were their 3 receivers in that game, and so they're missing, their top receiver in James Thomas, who does a lot more than just being, the go-to guy for them. You could use him a lot in the running game in terms of what he can do with motion. He's almost like an H-back because he's like a big guy. He's like about 6'2", 220. A very versatile guy who can be very heavily involved in the running game. If they didn't have him, they'd Jaden Greathouse, who's, obviously a kid from Texas who's made an immediate impact at Notre Dame. He wasn't available, and they're just kind of thin at receiver, period. So those guys came back for the Louisville game, but you could tell they were both coming off hamstring injuries. Those guys aren't healthy. They're not all the way healthy yet. I think they're going to be a little bit better for this week. But still, like they already don't have like a true wide receiver one, a dominant guy. And when you're missing that, and then plus you're injured and you're limited with what you can do personnel wise and what everyone kind of knows, I mean, that's going to hurt.
How do you expect the game to play out? Do you think that Notre Dame will play more of USC's game and it might get a little more offensive, or do you think that Notre Dame can, with their very strong defense that's been strong for most every game except for the second half of the Louisville game, will be able to maybe keep Caleb Williams in the well?
Well, I think you got to score points against USC. It's just a thing, because even if you contain Caleb Williams, to do it for 60 minutes, I think it's damn near impossible, right? I just don't think you are going to be able to do that. He's just too good of a player. He's one of these guys who just finds a way, because he can create so much even when the call isn't right. He can, break out of it and create with his legs, create plays, improvising. He just has that kind of special quality, that Patrick Mahomes type quality that very few quarterbacks have. So, I mean, they have to put points on the board, but I also think they're going to try to limit possessions. They're not going to try to, sling it all over the yard. One, because of the, receiver situation, they're not the deepest there, but also, I just think it suits them more to possess the ball as much as possible. So a huge key for them is going to be if they can run the ball, possess the ball and kind of keep it away from USC as much as possible. And if they can turn the ball over and, steal a possession or two. And because that's the thing, is that USC's defense has not been able to kind of steal possessions like they did last year. And that's another reason why they kind of haven't looked as good as this year.
What is the temperature on Sam Hartman right now after the struggles last week?
Well, I think certainly, no one is as hyped about him now as they were a few weeks ago. And I think that's fair. Even after the Duke game where, he did not play his greatest game, he still came through in the end. But I don't think most people aren't pointing the finger at him. I think, which is fair, it's not like he hasn't, he played well against Louisville, but they're not putting a lot of the lack of success on him. I think it's more directed at the play calling, the general execution of the offensive line, and just the whole talent in general, but the supporting cast in general, that he wasn't getting a ton of help. So, I mean, I think people have more of a realistic view of kind of where they're at in terms of anyone who thought they had expectations that they all of a sudden they were going to become this wide open offense that was going to put up the same kind of numbers that he put up at Wake Forest. I don't think that was ever realistic, because Notre Dame doesn't quite have that personnel to match that. And really the strengths of their team should be offensive line, tight ends, running backs, or they got a loaded backfield. That should be what it's based off of. And that's really what they were in to begin the season. And they had all that. He had the running game, he had the protection, and he looked great. So that's really going to be the key. If he has that, then he's going to go back to looking like, one of the best quarterbacks in the country again. And if he doesn't have that, it's, like most quarterbacks, especially when you don't have elite receivers, you're going to look pretty average.
Garrett, you got a question?
Yeah, Jamie, you mentioned there a couple of times about the roster deficiencies and some of the playmakers that they don't have. And obviously we mentioned the youth along the receiving core. What are some of the big factors or the leading factors going into Notre Dame's struggles in getting that high caliber, potent talent in on the roster?
Well, really, it's kind of an inherited problem from the previous staff, from when Brian Kelly was there. The previous wide receiver coach, Del Alexander, he had some trouble in recruiting, and they went through a time where, they signed 3 receivers in one class. I believe the 2020 class. One of those guys was played safety now, 2 of the guys transferred out, right? The 2019 class, they signed 2 guys there. Those guys didn't last 2 years. So they had a numbers problem. And then from that point on, they had to have all these guys kind of hit and sign the number of guys that they've had. And they just had too many misses there, poor evaluation. And this is, before Marcus Freeman took the job. And, from there, they, in Alexander's last year, they signed one receiver. And Notre Dame isn't a program with how they view academics and all that. They're not able to get as many undergraduate transfers to kind of plug holes. So they have to go the graduate transfer route. And then even in this year, they signed a graduate transfer in Caleb Smith from Virginia Tech. And he was their leading receiver. He was a solid player in the ACC at the very least. Well, he ends up having a really tough spring where all of a sudden he's running 3 to quit the team, right? So that was a guy that they thought was going to start and be their boundary receiver, and he ended up splitting the team. So they've just had horrible luck there in terms of what was there before, and because of the situation that they have with being unable to kind of fill gaps in terms of the transfer portal compared to some of these other programs, they haven't been able to fill them. So that's just kind of where they're at and why they've had to move some other guys to that position. And it's not that they don't lack talent. They have some guys who are talented there, but they're just very young and inexperienced, and they just aren't deep enough. They don't have enough scholarship receivers.
How fast do they have to move compared to, look, the transfer portal, when somebody goes in, it's going to be fast anyway. But when they have to particularly keep their eye on somebody who could fit, especially an undergrad with straight A's that's really good, how fast do they really have to move in that kid when he puts his name in?
Oh, I think, I'm sure you guys know too, right? That kind of thing that's almost like big process, because you have to have evaluated all these kids beforehand, right? So I think they kind of have to look at certainly all the guys that go to kind of similar type FBS programs like the Stanford, the Rices, the Vandy, Northwestern, Duke. If you have a guy who's a player there that you think might be in the portal, they have to evaluate that guy, because those are guys that might have a chance to actually transfer as an undergraduate to Notre Dame. And then, really though, but they have to find as much talent as possible. And then you can worry about the kind of grades that they come. But that's the thing. They've had some guys who wanted to come to Notre Dame, but they haven't been able to get in. And it's unfortunately, that's part of Notre Dame, and Notre Dame wants to, obviously continue to be who they are and keep the same identity in terms of what they mean to be a program that cares so much about academics and graduation rates and stuff and all that. And it's important to them. And, frankly, I think most alums would say that it should continue to be, but it just puts them in a very, very difficult position where I think they might have to be a little bit more lenient. I can't really see, because heading into this offseason, I don't really see how they can not add at least one or two in the portal to go along with, they have 3 receivers submitted, and they're very good prospects in the 2024 class. But, are those guys going to be ready to play right away? You guys know that freshman receivers, it's very hit or miss whether or not these guys are ready to play right away.
Now, they're either outstanding to a level that people can't comprehend, or they're not ready. That's how it is as freshman receivers. Jamie Uyeyama from Irish Sports Daily. Jamie, thank you so much for hopping on the show today. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
Thanks so much, guys.
All right. There you go. Thanks to Jamie. Next up, Grayson Gerd.